Spoiler alert, we all turn into our parents, right? As I'm working in these stores, people who come in, they're like, oh, I'm looking for this screw and I don't know, because my dad used to do that.
It's funny how like all the things in your life kind of compound, all that comes together, and now you're flipping houses.
Well, there's like a science to that too. Core of all marketing is sex and color. Those are the two things that sell. The way that we met, damn, this girl knows what she's talking about.
It's so different when you get to talk with someone who has that much experience.
The journey, at the end of the book, Kiyosaki says to go find a real estate group. And went there, got involved, and did all the things, right? Got immersed.
Since I met you and now your company is just explosively growing. So you're really inspirational for me. But watching you go through this process and how dedicated you are, it really helped me understand that great things take a lot of time and a lot of patience. You're the best. I appreciate you always just giving values, answering questions, sharing your experience for free. Shares a lot of game with newbies. Get in his vortex because you will learn just by being around him.
Marketing hasn't changed. The only thing that changes is the method of deliverability. Keep it very simple. We buy houses. We're just here to solve problems. Great, you're making a bunch of money, but you're also working 12 to 14 hours a day. In bringing in either people or outsourcing, you can buy back your time. Now, if you have 30% of your time back, go spend your time on the parts of the business that you love. I feel like there's this pressure to scale, and again, scaling is hard. It was the worst time ever. So what the fuck did I do? Cried myself to sleep that night. It was terrible.
Okay.
The parts that really energize you, and because you have absolute experts that can come in and handle a piece of your business, how we were able to go nationwide so quickly. And I was able to focus on what I wanted to do.
I think a lot of people get started, they get burnt out.
You know, staying consistent is tough. You have to have some internal drive. Like, be sure you want to do it because it's a lot of work and it's hard.
Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of the Early Risers Morning Show. Today, I am super excited. We have a real estate and wholesaling veteran in the building, Mr. David Olds. Thank you so much for being here. I know how much crazy stuff you've done in real estate, but for our listeners who may not know who you are, can you give them a little bit of background of who you are and how you got started in this game?
Yeah. So I can tell you where we're at now. We run easy REI closings, right? We're a nationwide transactions coordination company. So we work with investors and wholesalers all over the country, but that's a long ways from where we started. I actually started back in 2002. What were you in, like elementary school in 2002? Like, playing on the merry-go-round, doing something like that. So yeah, 2002. Bought my first house. It was a foreclosure from Wells Fargo. Like, I was moving into it, and it was the weirdest thing because it was my very first house, and I didn't realize why, like, nobody was at the table with us, and why Wells Fargo was the seller. So, and it was a house we were buying to live in, and had no intention of really fixing it up to sell it. It just was sort of what we ended up doing and what happened. But yeah, sold it, and like 2.5 years later, and made like $50,000. I'm like, wow, that was awesome. And my realtor's like, you don't have to pay taxes on that, right? I'm like, why? She's like, well, dummy, because it's a homestead exemption, right? You lived in the property. So that was how I got started, just buying properties to live in every 2 years and fix them up and resell them. And then, I did the most cliche thing ever. I read Rich Dad, Poor Dad, right? Like so many other people. And that was sort of the beginning of like the investment side of the journey where, at the end of the book, Kiyosaki says to go find a real estate group or a RIA or meetup or, whatever you want to call it. So, I got on my big computer with my huge monitor, and it was like web crawler because it's 2004, Google wasn't even invented yet. And I found a RIA in Central Florida and went there, got involved and did all the things, right? Got immersed because there was no podcast. Like, podcast didn't exist. YouTube
Right.
didn't, like, none of this stuff that's here today existed. It was go to the library and get a book, right? Go get Robert Allen's No Money Down or something. So yeah, just went to the RIA, got super involved. They had like 4 classes a week because it was all over Central Florida. So there was always something going on someplace, and went to all the meetings and all the weekend boot camps and just all those things, and got some coaching and mentoring and learned how to buy houses sub 2. Because back then there was the big thing that everybody talked about at the real estate meetups was pre-foreclosures. We're going to teach how to buy pre-foreclosures, which was great. But nobody was ever smart enough to think, I wonder what's going to happen when the bank takes all these properties back. Didn't dawn on anybody to start to think about that. And we were also shocked when 2009 happened. But so yeah, kind of graduated from buying properties that I was living in, fixing up, to having some investment properties that we were just rehabbing. And this was my part-time job because I had a real job that I worked 60 hours a week at. And
What was your real job?
My real job, I actually started when I moved to Florida after I got out of college. I went to work for a company called Scotty's Hardware Stores. So they were all over Florida. They had 177 stores. They were a really big company until Home Depot and Lowe's put them out of business. But I
Wow.
became a manager for them, and I worked in their merchandising department, which basically meant I was the guy that when they remodeled a store, I went there with a team of people and tore an 80,000 square foot store down to the bones, and then rebuilt it, moved everything around, and so kind of
Oh, that's
remodeling.
cool. So you were kind of doing construction in a
Yeah,
sense.
yeah. So that was interesting. I was a really good merchandiser. So like merchandising is when you go into a store and like the grocery store, like everything is in the right spot. Well, there's like a science to that too, right?
Mm.
Like everything that's at eye level is your stuff that is the highest margin. Your low margin stuff is at the bottom. So, but anyways, did
That is
lots of
super cool. You were like the layout guy of the store.
yeah. Other interesting stuff too, like when you go into a store, a well-run store, if you look at the end caps, which are just the product at the end of the aisle, right? Like that's
Mhm.
all promotional stuff. Like Pepsi, Keebler, whoever, like they pay them advertising dollars to put that stuff on the ends. But this talks about like the two things in marketing that are key. At the core of all marketing is sex and color. Those are the two things that sell. But if you're looking at those end caps, like you'll never notice two next to each other that are the same color. Why? Because your eye just blends, right? Like if you see a bunch of white flower on every end cap, your eye's not going to pick it out. So a good store will be like red, yellow, green, blue, purple. Like it'll be so that everyone's attracts your eyes. But anyways,
How did
so
that
so
kinda, like, translate into, like, whole well, I guess, real estate and marketing, and how do you feel like it did translate into that a little bit?
oh, the marketing 100% does understanding marketing. And but kind of to even go further back, my dad, when I was growing up, he was like ex-army guy, so we were like he was the fix up the house guy, and I absolutely honestly I hated it. I was that kid who's like, I'm not doing this. I don't want to rake the grass anymore. I don't want to, help work on the house. I don't want to put siding on the house, any of that stuff. And when I grew up, my kids are never gonna I'm never gonna make them do this stuff. I'm gonna have a condo so my kids don't have to rake the grass. Well,
I'm crying.
spoiler alert, we all turn into our parents, right? So anyways, as I'm working in these stores, I definitely can empathize with the people who come in and they're like, oh, I'm looking for this screw and I don't know, because my dad used to do that. He'd like go to the store and get some 2 inch number 10 stainless steel screws. I'd be like, just write it down, because I'd have to go into the store. I was like this 15-year-old kid and hand the piece of paper, and because I
That's
also have
really
super.
cool. You were exposed to all this stuff at a really young age. It's funny how, like, all the things in your life kinda compound, and
Yeah.
then when you're ready, like, to get into real estate, all those things you learned along the way kinda come together with the marketing and knowing
Yeah.
about small construction things and layouts of putting like, design layouts, like, all that comes together, and now you're flipping houses. Were you married and starting your family at that time when you were working at the hardware store?
Yeah, well, we got married in 2002. I had moved to Florida in 1993. So when I
Okay.
moved down there, I became their before I became the youngest store manager. I was doing that kind of running all over the state, remodeling stores, and then I got my first store in Key Largo, Florida, which was awesome. Like the greatest place to live is in the
It's
Keys.
beautiful.
It's so good. So my parents were down there at the time, and I ended up moving 11 times in 9 years, because what happened was I was the young store manager, and every time they wanted to fire somebody, they needed to move somebody across the state. It was me, because I at the time had no, not married, no kids, so I was the easy guy to call on a Thursday and be like, "Hey, pack your shit. You're moving to Tampa, and then Tampa to West Palm," and then I did this kind of back and forth all over. So it was funny. I did say to my dad one time, or he said to me, because I would just rent a house or apartment every place that I was. He's like, "If you were just buying a house at every one of these places you got moved to, you'd be in great shape." I'm like, I don't want to own that many houses. That's dumb.
That is
So
crazy.
I know, God, if I had, I'd owned 11 houses, and I'd never have had to do any of this stuff. So maybe it worked out for the best. But no, the thing running those stores is they were very contractor based. We had a delivery trucks and lumber yards and all that type of stuff. So I was definitely out at job sites a lot, walking job sites with our clients and our salespeople. And then, looking at blueprints and doing takeoffs, right? A takeoff is where you open up a blueprint and literally, like if you go to 84 Lumber or Pro Build, they'll do this for you. You can give them plans and they will give you a complete material list for your house. Like how many
Yeah.
2x4s, how many 8 foot, 12 foot, 14 foot, 16 foot, how many LVL beams, and, how many bundles of shingles, like what the trusses, like they can do all of that. And that's what I used to do. So yeah, it's just sort of all those things kind of combined, came together, and I bought this first house and I'm like, oh, well, it's got this crappy pink carpet in it. We can put laminate floors down, because this was when laminate first came out. I'm like, oh, well, this kitchen cabinet, we can update these and put some crown molding up. And oh, this sliding glass door, I can take that out and put French doors in, right? Oh, this little concrete slab, we can increase the size of that and build a little pergola. So it was just stuff like that from kind of growing up doing that and then being in, working for that type of company where I could get materials cheaper. And I was just, yeah, just kind of exposed to it. So that's why I started it rehabbing instead of wholesaling. In fact, fun fact, people don't realize this because I've done like 1,600 wholesale deals. I tried to wholesale in Florida and couldn't do it. Tadi, I'm like, I couldn't make it work. I don't
What do you
know.
mean couldn't do it?
I couldn't do it. Like I put out bandit signs, we sent out mailers, and couldn't do a wholesale deal. Like all the deals I just bought. Yeah, it was the craziest thing. And looking back, reflecting a little bit, I think it's because like I had a good job, right? Even back then, I was making, bless you, I was
Thank you.
probably making 85,000. My wife was making 50 or 60,000. So like we were
Yeah.
doing good.
Comfortable, yeah.
So yeah, it was very comfortable. Plus flipping one or two houses a year for
Yeah.
30 grand at the time. So there was no, like, I didn't have to make it work. You know what I mean?
Right.
But like, I remember putting out my first bandit signs because I went to this event and they're like, you got to put out bandit signs. So I hand wrote We Buy Houses and phone number and put out like 60 of them, 70 of them one night, all up and down 1792 in Orlando. And literally got done at like 3 in the morning, got home, fall into bed. First call is the police.
Oh
Hey,
wow.
son, what are you doing? Get these signs up. So I had to wake up, put my
Oh
shoes on, and
wow.
pick up every one of the signs that I just put out the night before. But yeah, I
That's
just
serious.
never got it
So
to
where did
work.
you end up doing your wholesale deal if Florida wasn't working out at that time that you got into real estate?
So do you remember 2009 and 10? Have you heard there
Yes.
was a little crisis? It was kind of bad. So I bought my last house in Florida, Deltona, Florida. It's 742 Trafalgar Street. If people, I always tell people if they want to look it up. So I bought this house. Listen to this. I bought it for 97,000. It was a probate deal.
Ooh.
Identical house, one block over, two blocks down. I had just sold for 214. 97's a win, right? Like we're good. It was dated, but half price. I bought it for 50 cents on the dollar. So, and that is in June or July of '08. So everything's still okay. Well, back then I was younger, more energy, skinnier, and I was like fixing it up, like, right, scraping popcorn and putting down tile and doing all the things. And so I got done in like it was late October, early November. Call my realtor, her name's Shayna. I'm like, hey Shayna, I'm done with this deal. I'm ready to list it. Also, I knew like we knew something was kind of going on, and we were looking to start investing in other markets. So I had been investigating like Huntsville and Birmingham and Chattanooga and Louisville. Like I wanted to be someplace kind of close. So, anyways, so my goal was I'm going to sell this house and I'm going to skedaddle up there, or at least start investing up there because I wanted to buy some apartment complexes. Because now I thought I was a mature enough investor to do the monopoly thing, right? Like I'm going to grow. So anyway, so I call her and she's like, yeah, now's probably not the best time to put it on the market because it's the holidays. I'm like, oh, okay. She's like, why don't we list it in January? And that way you don't have a bunch of days on market and it's not just sitting there and that'll be better. I'm like, makes perfect sense to me. So I call her in January. She comes over, her and her husband, and she walks through and she's like, it looks great. I'm like, I know. She's like, you did a great job. I'm like, yeah, I know. I said, what can we sell it for? So she sits down again. This is 2009. Like Facebook and Google, not even a thing. Nothing is online. So she has this notebook and all the pages, and she's flippy flopping through. And she's like, well, this one over here sold for 99, and this one sold for 120, but this one sold for 140. And I'm just sitting there like dumbfounded. I'm like, okay. I'm like, but those were all foreclosures, right? Like, I mean, we knew what foreclosures were, but like the wave was just barely starting to dump. And I'm like, well, but yeah, but my house is better. I can't even say it with a straight face anymore, but like my house is better, right? Like I'm remodeled. Look at those houses. They're not remodeled. She's like, yeah, but that's the comps. That's what they're selling for.
Doesn't
I'm
matter
like,
anymore.
yeah. I said, so what are you telling me? What can I get? She's like, oh, maybe like 147. I'm like, hold on, one block over, two blocks down, 214. She's like, yeah, that was then.
How much did you put into it?
I did it myself and I was doing it out of pocket back then. So maybe like 15,000 because all the work I did all the labor, right?
Okay, so you're
So
like, okay, I'll still make money, but it's not what I wanted.
no, well, I don't know. I mean, well, so anyways, so I said, no, I'm like, absolutely not. I'm like, no, this house is perfectly fully remodeled. This is no. And she's a listing agent, right? So, they don't care. She's like, well, what do you want me to do? Just stunned sitting there. I'm like, and at this point, I thought I was the most magnanimous SOB that's ever walked the face of the earth. I'm like, 154. Like 154. I'm giving this thing away. By the time I sell it, I'll recoup 50 grand. It'll be enough, right? She's like, okay. I'm like, do you think that'll do it? She's like, I don't know. We'll see. Out she goes, sign in the yard. That's January. Zero calls, zero calls in January.
Wow.
So the end of January comes around, and I'm not a pain in the ass, so I wasn't blowing her up every day. So February comes around, and I call her. I'm like, hey, like I've already kind of told my company I'm leaving in a couple months. Like, what can we do here? She's like, well, you want to lower the price? I'm like, to what? She's like, I don't know. I'm like, how about one? All right, we'll go to 147. You think that'll get it done? She's like, I don't know. I'm like, well, what do you mean? What do you think would do it? She's like, I don't know, maybe like 140, 142. I'm like, absolutely not, because I'm such a quick learner, right? Absolutely not. 147, let's start there and see what happens. So we got a couple calls, but no showings for another month. Like, it's
Wow.
terrible. March comes around. Finally, I'm like, all right, 139. Do you think that'll do it? No, now it's 120. Right. So the example I give to people, and it bugged me for the last couple of years, where people are like, the doom and gloomers, like, oh, it's such a bad market. It's so terrible. I'm like, shut up. You don't even know. A bad market is, I always say, picture this. Picture a fat kid at the top of the hill chasing a tennis ball down the asphalt. You know how fast that thing rolls? Well, that's what it's like. That's what it's like trying to get in front of a falling price, right? It's going
Yeah.
down so fast, you can't get ahead of it, right?
Yeah.
And that was exactly what happened from the time I bought it, even though I didn't realize it, the price was just steadily just dropping, dropping, dropping. And that was kind of a once in a lifetime thing, because the banks took back this inventory and they were literally just trying to get it off the books as fast as they could. But that's what it was like. It was terrible. So finally, I'm like, I can't sell it at 130, and then by the time I pay 13,000 in closing cost, like there's just nothing left. So at this point, now it's April, but like I knew I was leaving in like June. So I'm like running out of time. So I went back to kind of what I'd done, which was all the real estate events. I said, well, maybe I could lease option this, right? Maybe I could just lease option it, and I'd still own the house. I get some money down. I get some rent that would cover it. So I went out and bought a bunch of bandit signs again, and hand wrote 3-bedroom, 2-bath Deltona, owner will finance 5K down. And that, my phone all of a sudden blew up, because then, and this is where, as an investor, you have to understand what's going on in your market cycle, right?
Yes. 100%.
Because our strategies will always change and pivot a little bit, right? In a hot market, we want wholesale and rehab. In a bad market, you don't want to be rehabbing because nobody can buy. So, also in a bad market where the banks weren't giving money, that's a great place to offer owner financing. So, found a buyer. She moved in literally like June 7th or 8th, whatever it was, 7th maybe, early June. And so she's moving in, we're moving out. My moving truck's coming out, she's coming in. She gives me a cashier's check for $5,000. And during this time, the first part of the year, I've been going back and forth. We had decided on Chattanooga. So my brother, who was going to work with me, he had come up to Chattanooga, and we had bought this duplex in not the best side of town, and he was living in it on an air mattress, fixing it up, and then starting to do some wholesale advertising. So I'd been going back and forth, and we had contracted this house in Eastlake, Chattanooga, the Eastlake area of Chattanooga, which is definitely not the best side. It's right on the edge of Missionary Ridge. And, the guy was selling it. He had gotten married, and he just couldn't afford 2 payments. I'm like, hey, I pitched sub two, and he went for it. So that was great. But I hadn't been there in like 6 weeks. Sometimes your brain, you walk a house and you envision it differently than it is, right? So literally, our moving van moves out. We drive all the way to Chattanooga. It's 577 miles. It's a long trip with me, my wife, 2 boys, and 3 fat dogs. It's a long, long trip. And I get to the title company like just before they close. We sign the paperwork. I think I bought it zero down. Like I didn't pay anything, but I had to pay, closing costs, of course. So maybe $1,000, and get over to this house. And now it's like 7 o'clock at night. Everybody's exhausted. And I'm walking through this house, and I'm like, oh, this is not what I really remember. It's kind of rough. Like it's a 1900s house. The little floors are a little crooked. The doors don't quite close. The power was only working in half the house because one of
Oh,
the poles.
wow.
No air conditioning in June in Chattanooga, Tennessee, which is hot and humid. And, like the doors didn't quite close. So I like saw this mouse running through. It was the worst time ever. So literally I pull like two mattresses out. We go in, we throw them on the ground because everybody's just beat, wants to go to sleep. We put like two fans on us. And again, just, I've said this before to people, like I laid there that night and just thought, what the fuck did I do? Like, this is the worst thing ever. Like I did have a beautiful house. Yeah. I told my job I was leaving, but I could have found another job, right? I could have worked at Walmart or something. I could have found a job in retail, but here I am. I left this beautiful place, brought my wife and kids to this house that's a shithole. We moved to Chattanooga. We don't know anybody. And I have literally $5,000. Like, that is it. And that's a bad night. I'm going to tell you, like, I cried myself to sleep that night. It was terrible because I'm like, you failed on every level, right? As a person, as a husband, as a father, my dogs, like, how am I going to get cookies for my dogs, right? Like, it was bad. It was terrible. It was a low point, but then, yeah, you wake up in the morning and you're like, well, fuck it. I got to figure this out. Like, we got to do something. And that's when I got really serious about wholesaling, like really quick. We bought the signs. I spent a ton of time doing We Buy Houses signs, put the phone number on, and we just went to work. And people ask a lot, like, well, why were you successful? What was your deal? And like, we didn't do anything special, but we just fucking worked hard.
Mm-hmm.
We did all the shit that nobody else was willing to do. We put out 100 bandit signs every single week, at least 100, right? So every Friday night, whether it was raining, snowing, sleeting, you went to the movies at 9 o'clock. Well, we went out and did 100 bandit signs after. Putting out 100 bandit signs sucks for those of you that haven't done it, but they work. They work really good.
Do they
And
still work today?
they 100% still work. 100% still work. That's a great question because I feel like sometimes people want to reinvent the wheel, right? Like, oh, I'm going to do something better that's unique, that's never been done. Like, the shit that works, right? Like, marketing is the same. Like, marketing hasn't changed for 100 years. And that's kind of a whole nother podcast we can talk about. The only thing that changes is the method of deliverability, right? The way that your message gets out there, right? Text, SMS, PPC, SEO, but the messaging is still the same, right? Keep it very simple. We buy houses, right? We're just here to solve problems. That's it. So anyways, put out lots of signs, did driving for dollars, right? Because also, again, 2009, like, we don't have all the fancy tools that we have now, right? There's no prop
Right.
stream, there's no million cold calling companies. There's none of the PPC, like Google doesn't exist yet, right? It's just launching. So none of those things are there. So your only way to get deals is direct mail, driving
Mm-hmm.
for dollars, bandit signs, networking. Like, that's it. Like, that's old school.
Cold
That's how
calling
you
if
got.
you really wanted to figure that out.
It really wasn't skip tracing though. Like, skip tracing really
Ah,
wasn't a thing.
that's crazy.
Well, listen, I'll tell you a funnier story. Like, in my brain, I think, God, if I'd have just started this when I was in college, how great would it have been? But then I'm like, well, shit, there wasn't even a comping service. What would I have done back then? How would you have even comped, right? So I talked to old timers and like, oh, we'd get the MLS book and we would literally just look in the newspaper and see what other properties were selling for. Like, that was how they did it. Like, when you go
Yeah,
real,
I had somebody who started in '94 on a couple weeks ago, and we were
yeah,
we were talking about that.
yeah,
That's
like it was super caveman
We're so
rudimentary.
spoiled, yet people find it harder than ever to get a deal now. When yesterday I got on the dialer and on the 24th call got a great probate lead, and everyone will always say cold calling doesn't work, texting doesn't work, blah 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 doesn't work,
It's
but it all
clear
works if you
no.
just sit there and wait and and actually have good
Just
conversations with people.
Yeah, my operations manager, she coined the phrase, like, if you do the thing works. Just get off your ass and do the thing. It all
Love that.
works. Like, every course that's out there works, right? They all, just whether or not it resonates with you and you want to do it. That's the thing, right? But if I was put a gun to anybody's head and that had any idea of what wholesaling is and said you got to find a deal today, you would go out and find a deal today, without question. Without question. It's what time now? It's 11:25. I would have a deal by midnight tonight if you said, I'm holding your two dogs hostage and you got to go find a deal. I will find a deal. Like, I will. It may
Let's
be
talk
from a,
about that. Can you give
yeah,
us exactly what would you do? I just grabbed your dogs, they're hostage. You need a deal by tonight. What are you
yeah.
doing right now?
Well, first thing, I'm going to jump into Facebook really fast and make a post in every group, every local group that I can find. Hey, man, I
So
need to buy
good.
I need to
That's
buy a house. Right now, I'm ready to contract it. Today, I have EMD. Boom. Even if I don't have EMD, I'll figure it out. Then I'm getting in my car and I'm going out and I'm going to start door knocking. Like, normally I wouldn't do that, but like, if I got to do it today, boom, I'm knocking on a door. Hey, was somebody here? I'm talking to the neighbor. whatever it is, that's what I'm doing. I'm calling agents. There are 12 hours between now and the end of the day. I will find a deal someplace, right? The easiest thing to do would be to find it from another wholesaler, right? And negotiate a deal that's going to work and just kind of get in the middle of that deal. But you can generate two, three, four, 5 grand today if you had to. Absolutely. The problem is it's hard to for any of us, even the most experienced people, to maintain that pace, that level of I'm going to go get one every single day. Well, you can, right? It's just time compression and just putting in the work. But
Let's talk about that. How can somebody stay consistent and not burn
yeah,
out from, constant sales calls? I think a lot of people get started, they get burnt out in the first year, and then it's all about let me build this team, and people kind of get so focused on building a team instead of
yeah,
doing the thing now because it does get tiring. How do you think people can stay consistent over
yeah.
years?
Yeah, well, I did it for 15 years as a full-time wholesaler. So it's a grind, I'm going to tell you. And I love wholesaling. Like I'm one of those people that really love real estate. Wait, I don't wholesale anymore. We shut that down because this company was blowing up. But staying consistent is tough. You have to have some internal drive, right?
Yes.
So even though you're not the person jumping on the phone, but you have a team, right? So well, kind of let's back up first too. First off, that we're talking about scaling, right? Taking it from a one person operation to maybe a 5 or 10 person operation, right? Where you can do more volume. But one of my early mentors, I talked to him. His name's Kenny Rushing out of Tampa, one of the real OGs of this business. And I asked him about scaling. He's like, man, like, be sure you want to do it. First off, like, be sure because it's a lot of work and it's hard. Scaling is not easy. It's so fashionable. Everybody thinks they want to do it, but you know what? You can easily make $200,000 a year
Just
not
doing
working,
deals.
not working that hard, right? 20 grand a month. 20 grand a month is $240,000. It's not that hard to do 200,000. And that may be okay. And there was a point in my life where that's what we were doing, right? We were buying some rental properties with owner financing. We were doing 3, 4, 5 deals a month, which was still in our area. We were by far at the time the biggest wholesaler. But I was also able to shut it off and go on vacation to Europe for a month,
Yeah,
right? So there's some great benefits that you have running a small
100%.
business. I feel like people feel like there's this pressure to scale. And again, scaling is hard because now, once you have a team, right now you're responsible for them, right? I have 20 employees here. I need to make sure that we are doing enough revenue because they all have mortgages, they all have car payments, they all have fat dogs at home and that need cookies, and husbands and wives that need shoes and pants and clothes, and kids who need notebooks and all that stuff. So now I'm responsible for them too, besides just me, right? So
That's a fact.
that's what I tell people about scaling, right? If you're doing maybe got 100 or $150,000 in wholesaling by yourself, everybody's like, oh, if I could add 10 more people, I could do a million. Well, sure. But that growth is going to be difficult, right? That, where you're here to get up to here, you're probably going to make less money,
Yes.
right? I'm going to be buying more software and phone numbers and more skip tracing and more data and more and more and more and more and more. And chances are your revenue is not going to keep up with that income in the very, or that those expenses in the
That's such
very
a good point.
right? Like you're going to have to be prepared to spend money and make less for maybe a year. Or do you want to do that? If yes is the answer, that's awesome. Lots of us have done it, but also you're going to make less for probably 6 months or a year, right? The chances that you're going to hire one guy and that first guy out of the gate is going to blow it up is slim to none, right? Which is why people need great coaches like you and some of the other people in our industry, because you can help avoid a lot of those pitfalls by giving them a roadmap, but you still have to put in the time, right? You've got to put the time in. You have to do the work, right? Because I've been in the room with all the investor lift cartel bosses, right?
Right.
Top 50 wholesalers in the business, but every one of them runs their business different, right? Because it's all based on your personality, and what works for you in your business is probably going to be different from me. I hate cold calling, hate it with a passion, but I'll drive for dollars all day long and go talk to people. So we're all going to do it just a little bit different. So figuring that out really is what takes some time, right? Figuring that part out, hiring people, training them, right? If you've never trained people, like you can't just say, "Hey, here's a script. I'm going to put you on the phone. Best of
Right.
luck."
Right.
Good luck with it, right? Like, no, it's you're going to have to teach them, right, and help them understand, because the part about growing a good team is, and out of every 10 people you hire, you're going to get three, maybe four that stick, right? And when I say stick, like 6 months, right? Like
Right.
nobody sticks around for 10 years
That's
anymore.
a fact.
Um, but out of those four, you'll get one that, all right, will believe in you and believe in the vision, and where the company's going and they want to be a part of that journey, right? Those are the people that over time you stack around yourself, right? And that's how you start to build a team. And you
Yeah.
elevate people and support those people and put them in leadership positions where they're training somebody else, and that's just sort of how it starts to grow. But it takes time. There's
I like
nothing in
that. I like that a lot because it's like it's okay to be a 1, 2, 3 man
percent.
wholesaling army
Yeah.
for a while. And
Mhm.
it's okay if it takes, and you don't have to scale in it. That's what I try to display to people in my community. Like you don't have to feel like you need this team. If you're doing 2 deals, I mean, were you making 10, $15,000 a month before? If the answer is no, and then you're putting 20 hours into this a week and you're doing that, why not just
Yeah.
keep doing that for a year or 2 years, really get the hang of it? Because it's not going anywhere. Like here, 4 years later, wholesaling hasn't gone anywhere. Whether I
Yeah.
tried to scale, failed, succeeded, whatever, we're still doing deals. This is really, really good. Before we wrap up, how can people work with you to facilitate, getting their deals done a little bit easier? And how can people learn from you and follow you?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I'm pretty easy to find on Instagram. It's David Olds REI. So we post lots of content, business and wholesaling content there pretty much every
Very
day.
informational too.
Oh, thank you. Your stuff is great too. Also, funny story for all those of you who don't know the way that we met. We were at a joint event, and I'm like, "Oh, who's this kid that's talking in front of me? Oh, grumpy old guy." And I'm literally back behind the curtain, and I'm sort of just leaning on these like storage boxes back there, and I start listening. I'm like, "Oh, huh, well, shit, damn, this girl knows what she's talking about. She's doing a great job out there."
And I walked off the stage shaking and sweating, and I see David. He goes, "You did really good." I'm like, "Are you sure?" That
I'm
was
like,
really funny. That was a great way to meet. And that
"Yeah,
weekend, you actually taught me so much just over like a meal and just hanging out. And I'm like, yeah, it's so different when you get to talk with someone who has that much experience because everything that you feel like you're so stuck in, there's this easy like 30-second answer, light
yeah,
bulb. Oh, duh, why didn't I think of that? And then you can just go execute. And I think that's why it's so important to have a mentor, someone to lean on, or even being able to lean on your title company or being able to lean on someone who knows more than you when you're doing these deals because that's where you really get stuck.
yeah." So if you want, I'll tell you the thing that really held me back the most from actually scaling and building a bigger company, probably for the first 5.5 years of my business, right? Like it was just me and, my wife at the time, or, like one person. And what it was I had this thing, and a lot of wholesalers and entrepreneurs and business people have this. It's this little bit of narcissism where I'm the best. Nobody can do it better than me. Nobody can work as hard as me. Nobody's as good, blah, blah, blah. I'm a control freak and I'm going to wear that as a badge of honor. And it's all crap. It's all crap. Now, if you want to be small and do 2 deals a month, perfect. Great. Do it yourself, right? I've been there. I've done that. But at the point where you want to start to grow and do more things, then you have to bring in some people. It's
Mhm.
just impossible. You can't scale and grow without adding people, right? So because here's the thing. You are good at something. You're fucking amazing at some stuff. And so am I, but I'm not good at everything. Like that's just the dumbest shit ever to think that you can do every part of the whole business, from figuring out how to do Google PPC to doing your transactions, to managing property, to doing accounting, to doing bookkeeping, to come on, it's impossible, right? So you're going to have to hire somebody, right? You're going to have to hire somebody in house. And here's the problem with hiring, right? I'm going to bring in somebody and I'm going to teach them how to do PPC advertising. Well, what the fuck do I know about PPC advertising? Jack
Right.
and nothing. I'm sorry to swear on your thing, but I know nothing about PPC, right? So how am I going to train somebody, right? Like that's as likely as me hiring somebody to go out and teach them how to change the spark plugs in my truck. I have zero understanding of how any of that works, right? So instead of hiring somebody or hoping I'm hiring somebody who knows what they're doing, I can outsource it for a fraction of the price,
Right.
right? Like it doesn't make any sense. I again thought I should manage my 100 properties for 10 years. Finally, about 3 years ago, I'm like, I don't have the bandwidth anymore to do this. And so I interviewed a couple property managers and outsourced it to them. And I'm making more money with them managing my properties, and I'm paying them like 5% a month. So, there just becomes a point where you have to realize that, oh, the only way that I can grow, or just buy back my time, right? Just not be working 14 hours a day, because I became really good at that. But that's not great for your personal life and your kids and your dogs and your wife and your marriage and all those
For
things too. So
sure.
you can do it in spurts, right? Like we all talk about having some hustle, right? Hustle's a good thing, but that's spurts, right? You need to hustle and then level out, right? And stabilize, and then you hustle to the next level. But you can't be doing it, constantly. I did it for a long time, and it's not healthy for you. And great, you're making a bunch of money, but you're also working 12 to 14 hours a day. Yay. So
Yeah,
you gotta
there's a
take some.
big trade-off there.
Yeah. So in bringing in either people or outsourcing, the goal there is one, buy back your time, which is an amazing book by Dan Martell. If anybody hasn't read it, I
I love it.
recommend it. Oh my God. I listened to the audiobook at Christmas time, driving back and forth to Florida, changed my life. But yeah, you can buy back your time, because then what happens, right? All the things that you don't love doing, which, let's be honest, nobody loves doing transactions, right? In our case, let the people that we hire, people that do actually love that type of stuff, and we do it at a real high level. But now, like in our case, you have 30% of your time back. Like, go spend your time on the parts of the business that you love, right? The parts that
Yes.
really energize you and juice you up. And you get out of bed and you're like, yeah, I'm going to go cold call if that's what you like. Or yeah, I'm going to go talk to buyers. Or yeah, I'm going to work on my marketing today, right? Because you have absolute experts that can come in and handle that one little piece of your business, right?
Yes.
And I do that in my business. I just hired a fractional CFO from Simple CFO to bring in a real industry expert to come in and say, hey, you should be categorizing this way and doing this and spending your money. Like, here, let's get all your finances running at a very high level. Like, I can't do that by myself.
Right.
I couldn't pass accounting 101 in college, right? Like, that's obviously not for me. So yeah, that was the thing that probably held me back the most. But once I figured it out, it's a thing that attributed to the growth, right? How we were able to go nationwide so quickly is because we just brought in people who could do things at a very high level, and I was able to focus on what I wanted to do. And that's what we do at Easy REI Closings, right? We're just here to help wholesalers and investors grow their business. And we do that by helping them close their deals. We'll help them close more deals, right? They won't have those deals that get lost because they went to the bad title company or someone who wasn't
Right.
investor friendly, or there was some title issue that somebody said, oh, you can't close this. But in reality, if you'd have done this, this, and this, it could have closed, and that $40,000 wire would have hit your account. Yeah. And then that's it. So yeah, that's kind of what we do in the shortest version.
And so would people follow you or Easy REI Closings?
They can follow me because mostly I do all the postings. But
You're
if you, yeah, I'm the guy, right?
the guy,
Um,
the man.
but I know you can post a link kind of below or in the show notes here that'll
Yes.
give them some access, and we'll know you came from here, and we'll take really good care of you.
Yeah, actually, if anybody is interested, I actually had David on and we did a really good kind of like you could call it a coaching call, but it's on my YouTube channel as well.
Yeah,
But at that time, we told everyone go to toddiestc.com and they will be able to book a
yeah,
call, get some help, and figure out how they can get help with their TC. I really
yeah. So
believe that if you're doing like 3 deals a month, you're
mhm,
getting to that point where you're spending too much time doing paperwork
yeah,
than getting another deal. That 3 deals a month is like that mark where it's like, okay, I can handle one. That second one, you start to get too busy. That
mhm,
third deal, there's no point for you to be doing transactions. It doesn't make sense. You start to lose money, and they make it so easy, so simple, and so cost effective. Just check it out. It's 100% worth your time to do
yeah.
it. And I think, David, it's so cool that since I met you and now I feel like your company is just explosively growing all the other things you're doing. So you're really inspirational for me. I'm always kind of watching you as like, all right, that's like my big homie that's done all these amazing things, and it's like you see all these things all these people have done, but sometimes when you don't get to see them doing it in real life, it doesn't seem
Yeah.
real. But watching you go through this process you've been going through for over the past year and how dedicated you are, it really helped me understand that great things take a lot of time and a lot of patience, and it's just a
Well,
testament to like the journey. Like you've been on this journey for so long, yet you're still on this
to
other
that,
journey, which I could see you being like the next REI billionaire, and I'm super excited for the
thank you.
future.
Super kind of you to say. No, I just tell people I was too dumb to quit. But in the same, I'm also watching your stuff. Your social media is on fire. I watched your video the other day where you were doing door knocking. You're like, oh, when a seller ghosts you, and you were sitting on the steps. I'm like, damn, that's a great reel. Like, how come I'm not my guy? Sheik's not doing that for me. Like, so you have some great
I
content
have
too.
to
So
find a way to make it fun because, the day to day is the day to day. So it's like, how am I going to make this just silly and goofy and fun? I'll just make a funny video while I'm
see,
working.
I'm a grumpy old guy. I don't think of fun stuff like that.
No, you're not. You always say that, but you're the best, and I appreciate your time, and I
Mhm.
appreciate you always just giving value, especially to new wholesalers and in the Facebook groups, answering questions, just really sharing your experience for free, guys. If you don't see him in like all the wholesaling Facebook groups, David is in there answering people's questions randomly, like real deep questions that people charge a lot of money for. So don't miss out because this is someone that shares a lot of game with newbies.
Thank you.
Get in his vortex because you're gonna learn just by, like his cup overfloweth. You will learn just by being around him.
Very kind of you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, David. Have a great rest of your day, and thank you for coming on the show.
All right, I'll talk to you soon.
Bye-bye.